Thanks, Jim. So welcome everybody to the January 31st Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We appreciate everybody showing up. I'm going to share my screen in just a second and we'll get started. All right, so everybody should be able to see my screen. Can you guys confirm that for me?
Yes, we can see it, Sam.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. When I share screen, I can no longer see you guys. So I do have the chat going and I do have the list of panelists up. So if anybody wants to speak at any point in time, please let me know. So basically today it's the same agenda as last time. We're going to do some quick introductions. Although we've only got a couple of new people, maybe we'll just go around the room real quick. We'll talk again about those guidelines, overview, and scope to kind of keep us focused. And then we will do the draft changes since last time, and then we'll revisit the schedule and then we'll wrap up. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I will start with the introductions. I am Sam Albrecht. I'm the director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. It's my job to take care of these rules as we move forward and keep us, get us a good set of rules by the start date, implementation date of 1 July. So we will go around. I'm going to just go off the list. James McLean, Jim McLean, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, sir. My name is James McLean. I'm the operations manager for Arapahoe County.
Thank you. Janine? Janine Snyder? John Meyer?
Good morning, everybody. Dr. John Meyer here, Vice President, Minority Owner at Heritage Homes and Regional Manager of our Colorado sales.
Justin?
Justin Fluckey, structural engineer.
Margarita?
Margarita Gonzalez, owner of Minidwell, specializing in small-scale architecture.
Thank you. Nate?
Nate Peterson, Colorado Modular Homes dealer installer, also involved with affordable housing with the state.
Sean?
Yeah, Sean Roos with Clayton Homes out of Grand Junction, Colorado, longtime retailer.
Tim?
Hi, good morning. Tim Pate. I'm the building official with the city and county of Broomfield.
Thank you. Janine, are you there? Janine is a local building official with Park County. The attendees, let's just go down that list real quick. Eric?
Sorry, it's always hard to find the unmute button. Eric Freed, Larimer County Building Official.
Thank you. Mike Schmidt?
Mike Schmidt, CEO of Ensemble Ventures here in Colorado Springs.
Robin Butler?
Yes, Robin Butler, CEO of NOAA certified third-party inspection company doing remote inspections of tiny houses on wheels.
Thank you. Tawny?
Good morning, Tawny Payton, Executive Director for the Rocky Mountain Home Association. We represent the manufactured and modular home industry.
Thank you. Erin Card, our newest attendee.
Good morning. I am Erin. I am the lead designer at Tumbleweed Tiny Houses in Colorado Springs, and we specialize in RV style tiny houses.
Welcome. Okay, so back over to the agenda. We've done the introductions, and let me Find the right button to push. Okay, so there is a vacancy on the TAC that I wanted to bring up. This slide is not in the PowerPoint that I sent out. I just wanted to throw this up here though, and kind of let you know that we have another representative for an architecture representative. As you know, the TAC's made up of 15 members. We represent architecture, structural engineering, building code enforcement, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, construction. There's actually 3 building code enforcement members. Manufactured housing has 2. Tiny home industry has 2. Energy conservation and organized labor. Some people overlap. I know that there are people with different specialties that are representing different, representing one aspect of the TAC, but they bring a lot to the table. If you guys know of any architects that have factory built structure or tiny home industry experience, and you think they might be interested in this position, have them send a letter of interest to me. I'm going to hold that open until the 22nd of February, and then we'll get them into the next meeting after that. Any questions on that? And again, thank you all for your service on the TAC. We know this is a big commitment and a heavy lift for everybody, but we sure couldn't do it without you. And we want to make sure we have the fullest cross representation of all the fields that are listed here. Okay, if you think of anybody that, and just to be clear, the $5,000 reward is just a joke. There is not a reward for finding me an architect. But if you know of somebody, have them reach out to me. I'd be happy to discuss it with them. Shoot me an email. I can make that first contact. And if you have any questions on what we're looking for, let me know. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. We had another person join us on the attendee list. We've got a fairly small group. Marty, welcome. You missed all the introductions, but if there's anything, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the group, that'd be great. You may have to unmute, Marty.
Marty Williams, I'm just joining as a guest.
Yep. We've got you as a guest, but again, like I said, it's a fairly small group. If you have contributions to the group, feel free to raise your hand, and that goes for anybody else. If anybody wants to make a comment going forward, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in the order I see you pop up. For the new people, and just to remind everybody else, we're going to talk real quickly about the guidelines and scope. And again, this is being recorded, so that's another reason that I want to go over these things. I'm hoping that new people will go back and actually watch 1 or 2 of the recordings to kind of get themselves up to speed. If not, my goal here is to get them up to speed real quick. So we got a big job to do. Everybody knows that, a tough schedule. In order to get this done, I want to make the following points. This is a technical advisory committee meeting. The TAC members will have priority when we discuss items. Guests are welcome to comment. And again, we're going to keep this as friendly discussion as possible. For new members of the public, the following will get you up to speed. The controlling statute, which is Colorado Revised Statute 2432, 3301 through 3329. The tiny home bill as it was passed, HB 22-1242. The administrative rules that we are talking about modifying. The current version is 8, Colorado Code of Regulations 1302-14. And then the previous TAC meetings, which I just talked about, they're on the Division of Housing website under the State Housing Board page. And you can just scroll down and you can link. There's a technical advisory committee banner across the top of the page there, and that you can go down and look at all the previous recordings of the TAC meeting. We're only addressing tiny homes as defined by statute, not RV models, park models, tiny homes without wheels, etc. etc. We're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. We're only addressing foundations for those local jurisdictions that do not have a building department. We will follow the guidance language provided in the bill regarding different codes as it affects the small production concerns, small factories, costs, etc., the affordability issues. You can find those in the Colorado Revised Statute 2432, 33, 28. Plan review fees, inspection fees, and registration expenses are necessary because the legislature did not appropriate those expenses to this division. Regarding different codes and standards, we can point to the Administrative Rule 2.15, which allows alternatives to be considered. We are open to alternatives, and we've seen some of those come through. And we expect to continue to address those on a case-by-case basis. To keep us moving, if you have comments before or after the meeting or even during, if you can give me the form of that comment in such a way that it is in the language of an administrative rule or administrative rule change, that would be excellent for me. And yes, looking at the chat, I would prefer the architect to be alive and not dead. So getting down into the meat of stuff, as those of you on the TAC know, the rules have 7 sections. The first section is the definitions. We've spent a lot of time on definitions, but I think that's the base. That's why it's number 1, and that's why it's very important. I expect to see some slight tweaks to those definitions through this meeting and into the next meeting or two. The codes and standards that we are going to be adopting and modifications to those codes and standards. Rule 3 is the fees. Again, I talked a little bit about the fees. We are also going to do a fee study. Donnie Featherman, my manager for the Building Codes and Standards Department, is undertaking that. He'll get started on that tomorrow. The factory built, and then Rule 4 deals with the factory built residential structures, modulars and tiny homes, and then the non-residential structures, the commercial requirements. Rule 5 will be is the sellers of manufactured homes and their requirements. Rule 6, the installers of manufactured homes, and Rule 7 will be enforcement. We're going to keep that structure moving forward. I've got some ideas on how to restructure that. Overall, we'll take a look at if we have time to do that this year or next year. My concern is Rule 4, Chapter 4 on this is getting really long, and it has a lot of different components to it, and there might be a better way to reorganize that, but I'm not sure we'll get to that this year. All right, hopefully everybody is getting the documents that I send out. There was a Microsoft Word document that put all the changes in a very summary version. It's also, I have a summary version of that in the PowerPoint. And then I sent out a draft copy or a red line copy of the actual administrative rules themselves, so that you can see what it will look like in print. If you guys have other suggestions, you want to see other things, please give me the feedback, especially for the TAC members. I want to make this as functional for you guys as possible. So there is some areas that we're still being, that we're taking a look at. This is where I expect to have, maybe by the next version of the red line draft, to have some actual language. Excuse my cough. One is the egress entry from the landing platform for tiny homes. There were suggestions to change, and I'll talk about some of those a little bit later. But the question is it egress entry only on the landing platform? And we're taking a look at that. Dielectric testing has come up by 3 or 4 people. We're going to take a look at that also. Number 3 is the manufacturer's escrow and bonding requirements. We're still trying to nail out some clarification language there. Number 4 is the seller's escrow and bonding requirements. Still working on some language. And then fire suppression inspection coordination. I may have to go back and find the right person over on the fire side to really, fire suppression side, to really take a look at how we're doing inspections in areas that don't have an inspector in their building department. I didn't receive a lot of any comments really on foundations. Number 1, number 2, wildfire mitigation risk, blower door testing, fire suppression, and alternative construction or certification. I am going to jump over to my attendee list. Assuming I'm going to promote you to panelist because you're a TAC member. And let's just jump to the next slide. Well, let's just pause for questions. Any questions or discussions on what I've presented so far? There's a hand up on the attendee side. Robin?
Yeah, if you go back to the previous slide, the certificate, you said you didn't get any comments on alternative construction and certification. Could you kind of expand a little bit of, about what you're looking for regarding those 2 items?
So I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but what I tried to do was, based on the schedule that we put out and the topics in each schedule, those were the times that we were going to talk about some of those. Alternative construction is one where we've had some internal discussions on, and I've talked to a couple folks on the TAC regarding that. We're actually talking about renaming alternative construction. There seems to be some concern on what's the responsibility when it comes to attaching the insignia once the alternative construction is done, and who's overseeing that on site. These are things that are coming from the factory that are not installed, and how we make sure that the unit is complete per code before the insignia goes on. So if you have ideas in that area, let us know. On the certification piece of it, this deals more with along the lines of certified factories and certified installers. And if you have any, if you have had a problem with getting certified and would like to see that because of the current rules, and you have alternatives to those rules, we'd be happy to take a look at that. I will talk, Robin, in just a minute about some the other changes, including virtual inspections or remote inspections that you have sent some comments on, but that's in this next next couple slides. Does that answer your question, Robin?
Yeah, pretty much so. From what I have read, you have registration of manufacturers and installers, and you have certified manufacturers and installers. That's kind of how you separate the 2. And basically what I understand is you start out with registration, and then you do whatever it is, 5 completions or something, you can become how you become certified. And then there's a few less requirements for inspections of those installations and those plants. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. All right, looking over on the TAC member side, Tim?
Yeah, thank you. So 2 comments. I started with one, now I've got another one.
Okay.
The wildfire mitigation risk is kind of maybe we could bring that to the table concerning, the WUI code, the Wildland Urban Interface Code, that quite a few jurisdictions have adopted for parts of their county or entirety of their county. And there's a potential coming up from the state for some additional potential WUI requirements. How is that going to be reflected in these rules, or is it already adequately there? So that's my first question.
So the answer to the first question is, it is now in legislation where we talk about local snow load and wind load and thermal. It also legislation added and wildfire mitigation in there. That is the responsibility of the locals. How we clarify that in the rules and start putting that in place is open for discussion, but it has been changed in legislation and is now part of statute. Does that answer your question? But it just adds the one thing I just said, 3 words, and wildfire mitigation to the current discussion. It doesn't give us any guidance on what we're going to be doing.
Okay, that's what I recalled. So is that then part of something that our group needs to flush out with these rules? Is how that is for you guys?
I'd be happy to have that discussion on what that looks like on the local side. My concern is we get a unit built, or we get plans in and it's not addressing local wildland urban interface requirements that have been adopted. So I don't know a lot about that. I helped run the emergency management center or operations center in Elbert County, and I've been in on some of those wildland urban interface discussions. And then I assume the state will have some responsibility in areas where there isn't local jurisdiction, but I'm really waiting for state guidance on what an adoption of a wildland urban interface standard. And I don't think there is one yet. Is that correct, Tim?
No, there isn't. So there was a move to that last legislative session. It went to a committee. If I recall, it didn't make it out of the committee.
Right.
So it died, but I've heard through the CML my city manager office that there is, whether it's already been introduced or another one similar is going to be introduced. And so I don't know where that is since the session just started, but yeah, I'm suspecting that it has maybe a lot more potential traction this time around, but so we'll know by the end of April, I guess.
Yes, we will. And Tim, let's just talk about, and I'll throw it out for the other local building officials. What are you guys looking in as far as adopting a wildland urban interface? Are you looking for protective space around the home? Are you looking for certain fire rated materials for siding and for roof? Or is there something more that you guys are looking at?
Well, Broomfield, we're not adopting it. We're not in what we call the wildland urban interface area because we're not rural. Janine, I know, has probably adopted it up there. And but in any case, I know Boulder County just expanded theirs from the foothills all the way down to the eastern half of Boulder County, which goes up to County Line Road, based on the Marshall Fire. But what it is basically it's non-combustible exterior siding, Class A roofing, defensible space or open space, a certain amount, no wood fences, no combustible decks, screens on soffits and things like that for burning embers. And in some portions like the Boulder County and the western up in the foothills, they require like laminated glass or fire rated glass. They did not include that on the eastern half. So it's a variety. Other jurisdictions who've adopted the WUI code maybe have done it all complete or with just portions. So
I know in Delaware County, we were looking at things like, I mean, we've got a portion of Black Forest that comes up from El Paso County. And so we've got actually some trees in the county. But grass fires was another big concern. I see a couple other hands up. I'm going to go to Janine.
Yeah, we adopted it in 2016 for the 12s in full. Probably should have looked at that a little closer. So the 18s, we're going to adopt it, but go into a phased approach. And currently, we're going to focus only on fire mitigation and defensible space. So that's what Park County is going to be doing with it. But once it goes through legislation and is adopted by the state, wouldn't we treat it just like we would the electrical code adoptions and plumbing code?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Nate?
Yeah, I was going to echo what Tim was saying earlier. I think it's going to happen again this legislative session. I think one of the things that from a factory standpoint that's important is that I'm not a proponent of saying that the homes have to abide by the local adoption items for all those things that you just said. If, you know, Boulder County requires a certain kind of window and this other county doesn't, and, you know, all the different variations associated with that, that doesn't lend itself to manufacturing, which is what we're doing. We can't have 4 different brands of windows for 5 different areas in Colorado, you know, and so well, as we deal with that now, like where, you know, if we bring in a house to Boulder County, unfortunately they don't apply. A lot of times we'll comply just if we can, you know, from a design standpoint, but technically, obviously we don't have to because it's DOH jurisdiction. But I do see us kind of waiting until the state comes up with their plan so that then these factories can actually just provide the state plan versus having a million variations across the state that they won't be able to integrate into a manufacturing process.
Okay. Let me jump back over to the attendee side. Tawny, you had a question, your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So House Bill 1096 was introduced this year. I'm not sure what was introduced yesterday. I haven't looked at the list yet, but 1096 is expanding the Wildfire Mitigation Resources and Best Practices Grant Program. So I don't know if there will be other wildfire bills, but that's the one that's been introduced so far. And it's more about education, research, those types of requirements, and not so much adding building requirements for wildfire mitigation.
Okay, thanks, Tawny. Tim, I'm going to jump back to you. I just remembered because you said you had 2 items and we went off and discussed wildland fire. What was your other point?
Well, I want to just make another comment on the WUI
Okay.
code. So it was my recollection that the legislation that was introduced last year was actually proposing to create a state fire code group, kind of similar to maybe the Colorado Energy Code group. And it would, I don't know who would be on it or how they'd be who'd be selecting that from the state level. But it was my recollection that that group at the state level would review local jurisdictions and decide for the local jurisdiction which part of their community needs to adopt or enforce the WUI code. And I think that's what we had a lot of heartburn on with a lot of the local jurisdictions. Of course, since we're a home rule state, that could very well have been why that didn't make it out of committee. But so if something does come back that's similar, then you don't really know, you know, if you're going to move a unit into a certain part of the jurisdiction, if that's going to have to comply or not based on a state code. So that's what I recall. It'll be interesting to see what happens. My other question was back to that came up was alternative construction. And I know in the past we've talked about that the AHJ, the local jurisdiction, is responsible for inspections and kind of the other part of the permit for the setting the unit, doing say the like decks and stair landings, et cetera. which is outside of the scope of, I guess, what the definition of alternative construction is. Would that still be correct?
Yes, they will still be responsible for that. There's also an option for the local jurisdiction to defer the alternative construction inspection, in which case the state would then do that. But we always give the locals right of first refusal, for lack of a better term. Tracy, welcome. I promoted you to panelist. You should be good to go on that side now. Okay, let's jump into, I'll try to keep my eyes on hands. Eric, I'm sorry, let's go back to you.
That's fine. I just wanted to give you an update on that wildfire bill. It's different than the one that was mentioned before. Has not been introduced yet, but I was on a conference call with a couple other building officials and Senator Cutter from Jefferson County. It's the same bill that they tried to introduce last session, but it came late. It would establish a wildfire code resiliency board with, I forget, 16 or 20 members appointed from a variety of places, and maybe by the governor, maybe by a variety of people. The wildfire board would adopt a minimum statewide wildfire code, which we don't know what that is, but presumably it's based on the WUI code. And then local governments, and they would also define the wildfire hazard area, I think based mostly on Colorado State Forest Service guidelines and other mapping. And then local governments having jurisdiction in the wildfire area would have to adopt at least that as a minimum code. But there are some issues that are being worked out, like what happens if a local government doesn't do that? There's no clear mechanism. This board would also be able to review local governments' codes and their administration of the codes. And as building officials, we don't like them reviewing how we administer our codes necessarily. And again, it's not clear what happens if they determine we're not administering the codes in accordance with the law. So there's some wrinkles to be worked out, and Senator Cutter's meeting with stakeholders, and that's why it hasn't been introduced yet, but we fully expect it will be introduced soon. It's in written form. If it wasn't the draft was shared with a few of us, but it's private, so I don't feel like I can really share with the whole group at this point.
Great. Well, it sounds like they've still got some work to do in front of them on that. I think we, if it does look like it's going to have an early adoption date, that is statewide, and we were chatting previously with some electrical code and energy code updates that are also coming down the road. We may have to approve the rules as we think best now, and then do amended rules someplace before the next cycle. We'll just have to take a look at timing and see what comes out. If that does occur, we'll pull the TAC back together and take a look at that. We also have the ability to do emergency rules. And then, we will allow everybody to comment on those also. But thank you, Eric, for that update. Okay, so in that red line version of the rules that I sent out to everybody, disregard the highlights and the numbering issues. Staff, which is me, I'll have to cross-reference back to the Colorado Revised Statutes, the adopted codes, and renumber as needed. Okay. If you're opposed to a change, please provide information why. Health and safety, manufacturing difficulty, duplicative, not necessary, wrong code. Let me know those things so I can, because we're going to have to start prioritizing in order to get this out for final review in the month of February. Oh, sorry, let me go back. If you're in general agreement to a change, but think the wording needs changed, please provide the new recommended wording. You can either make edits to the Word docs, send emails, smoke signals, phone calls to discuss are fine, but I really need it in writing from you. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So what are the draft changes from the last set of administrative red line version of the rules that I sent out to this version? One, we changed the title, and then I tried to keep the numbering system in line with what we have done. One is the rules. I'm sorry, the rule one is the definitions. We're talking about changing alternative construction to on-site built compliance. So that's going to get rid of AC. It confuses a lot of people. But on-site built compliance is just a word change. And there's a little bit of a, yeah, so we deleted that and replaced it with on-site built compliance. We have built for purpose trailer out, it's still in there. We took out the requirement for required engineering drawings. I added factory built to there just because I thought it provided some clarity. We added to and or a tiny home or a tiny home in a couple of places. I need to check the definition of occupancy or occupied in rule 1.16. We deleted the permanent foundation since it's defined in statute. We added remote inspection as a definition, and we deleted temporary foundation because it's in statute. We added tiny house as a definition. And this is the one that I alluded to in the last meeting, and it will probably affect the IBC. Those that are building to IBC as transitional housing communities. We're seeing a lot of those pop up, especially with the initiatives on homelessness, veterans transition housing, young adults in transition, those type of things. And then we had that discussion already, I think, on vehicle chassis. Going to pause and see if anybody that has taken a look at the administrative rules has any comments or suggestions. Rule 2, and we can come back to these things too if you guys want to dive down into them some. Rule 2 is codes and standards. We added in tiny homes to the first section. I deleted that they're readily available for public inspection for the codes at the office, because the office is really not open anymore. So if anyone knows if there's some legal or state requirement for that, I'm sure the Attorney General's office may flag me on it. But if not, then we're not going to make those publicly available. Also, we made some changes to ice barriers based on staff recommendations or the guys that are out there in the field. We added a revision to the interconnection piece on smoke alarms. Some more changes on ice barriers. And then we made some changes to Appendix Q based on the last meeting, right? Please review these in detail. Oops, sorry. There is an exemption. If you look at GI here, there's an exemption for ceiling attic insulation to R30 for structures less than 500 square feet. So we're going to take that adoption. Changing that landing platform riser height on the loft floor from 18-inch max to 26-inch max. 2.5.11, the dielectric strength test. That's one that we've been talking about. That's the wrong section currently quoted, and we'll replace with the correct one. We're also trying to clarify the goals. Those that have been sending in comments on that, I appreciate it. And then 211 and 212, we added in tiny homes. And then in 214, we updated the reference document there. Rule 3,
Sam?
Yes,
Yeah, real
Sorry,
quick question
I
on the
missed-
on the insulation, please.
say that again.
On the insulation, I have a question.
Okay, please, go ahead.
So yeah, I would agree with that R30, just based on all the discussion we had last couple of meetings. So then it sounds like the intent would be to leave the exterior wall insulation requirements and the floor insulation the same that's listed in the IECC, correct?
Yes, that's my intent.
Thank you.
As I stutter through this, Tim, when I looked at the table that provided the 500 square feet changes, I believe comparing it back to IEC 2015, the only changes was in the ceiling. I will make a note to double check that in detail. But I believe that was the only change. If anybody knows if there was any other changes in that 500 square foot exemption for walls or floor, please let me know. Tracy?
Yeah, just so you know, Sam, I think we have some verbiage that a couple of the builders, that I definitely am going to be submitting as far as the R value. I know that the 500 square feet, R30 in the roof kind of solves the pains, but truthfully, what we're looking for from a builder community is probably more along the lines of R28 in the roofs at under 400 square feet. There's some reason behind it, and I think the verbiage that I've kind of typed up and I'm going to send over to you guys that I've gotten from the framers and just in Austin, and just understanding all the differences in the height. And this is about, there's a lot that it comes to and why the builders are asking for this. Otherwise it changes a lot of methodology in their building practices that they feel and that we feel that we've figured out over 10 years. And we have worked with engineers, and we have worked with multiple people, done a lot of testing, and as you can see, a whole lot of changes to make so far. The insulation values, for the good builders anyways, it keeps coming up because it changes so much of their build, right? If they're already doing equivalent to a 4x8, ridge beam, they're really trying to stick with the 2x4 framing, which when you're doing 2x4 rafters, there's only so much R value you're going to get. It's math, period. It's just math. There's just nothing more they can do about it. If we stick to the R30 instead of, hearing them out on what they're asking, this will change a lot of their methodology, which is going to add weight. It's going to make their units top heavy. And we're just not seeing the benefit of adding the additional R2, what it's really doing. I've also, reached out to our insulation experts that we contract out with, and the costs imposed to the end users, just so you guys know, their insulation value is probably gonna go up significantly in costs, and that's okay. We want to bring it up a little bit and we want to meet this, but I'm letting you know that we are going to be submitting verbiage that's going to be asking for a slightly less R value, but we're not asking at 500 square feet. We're asking for under 400 square feet, because that's typically what a tiny house on wheels is going to be, under 400 square feet.
By statute, it can't be for a tiny house. It has to be 400 feet or less, square feet or less.
Yeah, but I think that when we go to the R30 500, that's not, I'm never going to build a tiny house on wheels that's 500 square feet.
Right.
I will build a 400 square feet one, because I can have access to, a 40 foot by 10 foot engineered foundation that will meet all the requirements to build a house on, and DOT requirements. But I'm never going to build 500 square feet on wheels. So I feel like the verbiage that we're going to submit, I'm hoping that the team will consider.
Okay. And I believe Appendix Q allows tiny houses and tiny homes. I think it both defines them as 400 square feet or less. The gray area is, I'm not sure what drove the 500 square feet number for that table that we found.
I think it was non-attic is where that came from, like non-attic requirements, maybe.
It was a non-attic
Correct.
environment.
Correct.
Yep.
Right, because we don't have attics in tiny houses, but so
Yeah.
I'll finish that verbiage because obviously I didn't come up with it on my own. I consulted a handful of experts that really understand the mathematics and the structure and the framing and everything that it's all tying into. So I'll make sure that I get that submitted to you.
Okay,
With it
great.
being tax time, it was a rough crunch these last couple weeks.
Yep. Just to jump way to the end, if you guys have written comments, I'd really like to have them by the 6th of February.
Okay.
So I can incorporate them into the next version for the 14th February meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No, thank you. Tim, I think you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, thank you. I know in the past couple of meetings, Robbie Schwartz had offered to do a courtesy res check on one of these building plans. And I don't know if Robbie's on today, but I think it would be, I'm wondering if that's been done yet, because it'd be really interesting to see with such a small structure, how, the proposed R values that the manufacturers are going to put together, how that's going to look, and see if it passes.
So Robbie wasn't able to make it this meeting. If he pops in, we'll come back to him, but I don't think anybody has sent him anything yet. Tracy?
So yeah, so I decided to try to be a little independent and try to do the res check on my own. And so I've attempted it twice, and I am going to reach out to Robbie for some help. Matter of fact, I'm literally going to send him an email now today to make sure. I wanted to at least try it without having to reach out to him, but I do need his help. So I'll let you know how that goes, Tim.
Yep, and thank you, Tracy, for volunteering yourself to do that. And we really do appreciate everything you're doing. If you guys can run that res check by February 6th, then I can get the packet out on the 8th, I think, for that meeting. We can include some information on that. That'd be great for discussion on the 14th. Cool, thank you. Any other comments on Rule 2, which is codes and standards? Eric, you're exactly right in that. Further consideration, amendments by the TAC is why we're here today. All right, thank you. So guys, just as you know, I'm trying to run all this on my own. I've got the PowerPoint up, I've got the panelist list up, I've got the attendee list up, and I've got the chat list up. So if I hit pause for one reason or the other, it's because I'm trying to watch all 3 or 4 things at the same time. Thank you for your patience with me. Rule 3, fees. So again, this is where I wanted to introduce, and I think I alluded to it last year, to allow a 3-year factory option for registration. This would allow them to not only not have to do that again every single year, but would also keep their plans alive. Currently, if a factory has to do annual review of the plans, we're looking at options to not have to do that going forward, unless there's significant changes, of course, in any of the plans. So that would be a 3-year factory option. I am also considering, and this did not come from anybody other than myself, so you guys can let me know what you think, but late registration fees. It it takes extra staff time and resources to keep pinging people that have not registered on time. I'm happy to take a look at, I think currently you're getting 2, if not 3 notifications that registration is due. It's the same for factories, installers, but I'd really like to see those come in on time. I'm not talking about excessive penalties, but just something to get your attention. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns about that. And then we canceled inspection fees on 3.6 and reworded 3.8.5. This is also where I'll mention that we are going to take a look at not only what local jurisdictions within the state are charging for fees, realizing that it's an apples to oranges comparison because we have to have individual inspectors with individual vehicles running across the state, and hotel room stays, and the local jurisdictions don't generally have to do that. The other piece of it is we are also going to take a look at some other states that have fee schedules in place and compare our fees to that. If you guys, from anybody, manufacturers, installers, sellers, have recommendations for state fees that is clear and concise, please let us know and we'll take a look at those as we modify our fees. Any comments on fees? Sorry.
Yeah, this is Robin.
Hey, Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on 3.1.1. There's a $600 fee for the factories, the plants. And question is, if you're an owner builder building just one, which is one of the mandates that we need to consider, the smaller manufacturers, the owner builders, and the custom home builders, is there a way to have a lower than $600 fee for a somebody that's just going to build one unit?
One unit a year, one unit at a time? What let me get some clarification, Robin.
Well, owner builder, in my mind, they can only build one per year and 5 in their lifetime, was what I had seen in some other places. But you know, when we do an owner builder permit in our area, we also have to commit to live in that unit for a year before we can sell it.
Okay. Yeah, there is some exemptions for, I believe, less than 5 builds a year. I'd have to go back and take a look at legislation. So I will circle that $600 fee on 3.11 and we'll take a look at that. If that seems excessively high, we'll take a look at that. We still have to do all the steps though, right? We've still got to look at plans. We've still got to all the staff involvement in that, but I'm willing to take a look.
Yeah, well, there is a plans review fee that's included to look at the plans, and I think on the plans review
So you're
fee,
talking about the registration fee. I got it open to the right section now for plant factory. So you're thinking of a tiered structure for factories that do less than X number of units a year versus $600 for units for factories that do more?
it could be something like that. I think someone who's building 20 could probably handle a $600 fee, but someone who's building one, or, you know, maybe half a dozen, a small manufacturer that builds a half a dozen, that might be a little excessive. So I don't know what the number should be. I just thought that could be adjusted for the smaller manufacturer and the owner builder and the custom home builder.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Any other thoughts from the group on those, on fees?
I had one more question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Robin.
I'd like to, if you could define in 3.1.2, there's an inspection agency, and 3.1.5, there's an independent inspector. Could you kind of describe the difference between the two?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry. I'll bring that up for the next meeting, though. I hate to say something that's wrong. I think I know what it is. I believe the inspection agencies are those that are doing third-party inspections, and then the independent inspector is just is more on the local inspections for. But again, I want to go back and check.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Rule 4. We added under A, we added tiny homes to title. We under 4.5, we added information on the 3-year registration. Between 4.6 and 4.7, we added the legislative requirement for compliance with escrow requirements for manufacturers. And as a starting point, I just cut and paste from the registered sellers list requirements as a starting point. We've got some time to work through that. We're not trying to double dip on a unit. I believe if we have a escrow requirement for a at the seller end, that the factory doesn't have to keep that same amount on that same unit. But if that money starts shifting from the seller to the factory, I believe that is probably the best way to look at that. So that is in legislation. It is a new requirement for you factory reps. Please send me your thoughts on how to make that better. I would certainly appreciate it. And Tracy, you've got a hand up?
Yeah, so I definitely am gonna reach out to you on that one because I already actually reached out. Matter of fact, I went to my bank last week, and if they don't have that set up in the system, it's going to be a different process as far as escrow goes and what banks will offer that. And you guys talked about that previously. Maybe it was Mo that had mentioned there's a list of banks out there that offer that service. I did have to learn the hard way. I was just praying that my bank was on there and that I wasn't going to have to make some, drastic changes. But not everybody's bank's going to be on there. And so I would definitely encourage people to try to start getting ahead of it now, because my bank didn't even offer the service.
Okay. And there's also, I believe, a bond option. You can either do the escrow or the bonding. And there are bonding companies across the country that can help, I believe, too. Did you look at that yet, Tracy?
No, I wanted to start with the bank, thinking it was going to be easier just to do some escrow accounts, right? And just make it nice and easy because I already have an accounting system set up to take care of my customers properly. So I thought it would be easy just to take that approach. Just got bummed out that the credit union that I work with doesn't offer it. So it's okay. I probably will look at the bond option now. And but I would probably reach out to you and chit chat with you a little bit about that, Sam.
Okay, thank you. Nate, do you have comments on that? I think you're.
Yeah, Tracy, I think there's probably a little bit more to come on this, in some of the following meetings. The banks don't have escrow accounts is what you're going to find. We've all been doing this for, basically we have a separate account that we don't commingle for deposits that we call our escrow account. But I will tell you the bond option is extremely easy. Called Mauer Foster. That's who most of us use. It's very affordable. It doesn't cost a whole lot to post that bond to Division of Housing. It's literally a couple $100 a year.
You are awesome. Thank you for that.
But there's more to come on that. We're trying to figure out a better way because what you just ran into is the challenge that we have is that escrow accounts exist at title companies. Title
Yeah.
companies are not really willing to do this. We've had some conversations with them. And so we're still trying to figure this out. But right now, all of our quote unquote escrow accounts are a separate non-commingled bank account anywhere. Yeah.
I appreciate you for that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nate, for that. There's a hand up, I think, on the attendee side, but it's not showing me who it is. Thank you.
I had my hand up if you want to call on me.
Go ahead. And I can't see you now either. So who is this?
This is Robin.
Okay,
Butler.
Robin, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Question I have, obviously, bonding and escrow requirements for manufacturers. Will there be an exemption for an owner builder who's not going to sell their unit?
Yes. Let's make sure we get that in there.
Sam, could I say one more thing?
Yes.
I do want to highlight to the manufacturers that are on this call that this component is new. We've been dealing with this as dealers forever.
Yep.
And so if you're a manufacturer on this call, we need to start talking about through the correct procedural talking involving Division of Housing and from a committee standpoint about how this requirement should be implemented, because it's not a small concern of yours. I need to call attention to that.
And Nate, thank you for that. We realize this is a new requirement. Hopefully we've got plenty of time to get it worked out. Again, there's somebody with their hand up on the attendee.
Oh, sorry. I'm reading that cut and paste from registered sellers requirement as a starting point.
Yep.
That 100% won't work for a multitude of reasons. Like, we're going to have to craft something that's unique to them, because that basically would not allow them to use it to buy materials if we cut and pasted.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, we really need to get some dialogue going on that point. And specifically, we might need to bring in some of the other manufacturers, because Heritage that's on this call doesn't take a big deposit. They take like $2,000. So we really need to be talking to like Mike and Champion, and we need to involve some other manufacturers that do take those larger deposits that then use them to buy their materials to build the house with.
I think that's
Fading West too. Fading West, we need to
be true at the tiny home side of that too, Nate. I think it's going to be
absolutely.
It's going to be a concern.
Correct.
Tracy?
Well, yeah, I mean, the deposits are absolutely used for materials. I mean, if you're not using it for materials, then you shouldn't be in business. So, but yeah, that's definitely a concern for me.
Yeah, it's a big item. So,
well, that's why I went to the bank and started thinking, okay, I'm going to get ahead of this, right?
Right.
From the build and the construction and everything so far, I mean, we're talking, this is more of a big deal to me, because I feel like, my bank doesn't even know what I'm talking about with the state of Colorado.
And they won't ever. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially if you're using a credit union, Tracy, I'm not sure they will either. So
yeah,
remember, credit unions and banks are not the same animal.
Right, I totally get it. I totally understand, and I do have one of our banks listed on there, but I think this Maurer Foster approach that Nate mentioned is probably the smarter approach for me.
Okay.
Sam, this is Tawny. I'm the one that has. Hey, I'm the one that has my hand up.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to share with the group, as Nate mentioned, the TAC has been working on this escrow requirement for the sellers for at least a year or more. And I've been working with Mo on this project for quite a while. And it is a challenge because most banks don't offer those services either. And I'm not sure if there was something that was adopted or some process that Mo had to go through to create an exemption, or if we're just not like looking at the escrow requirements because there is the bond option. But there, and so again, I'm not exactly sure how Mo handled that, except that, you know, we're working on it. I mean, collectively as a larger group, we're working on it, trying to find resources that offer these services because they're few and far between.
Correct. Tawny, Mo and I have visited a little bit. Nate and I have visited a little bit. I'd love to set up a meeting with you, or maybe at our next meeting, talk about what you guys have done so far, and just to make sure we're all on the same track. And then, so yeah, we might have to add another publicly noticed meeting to kind of work through some of those details. And I'm not opposed to that, but I think maybe we can do it on the 14th meeting too. At least get everything laid out, maybe.
Sean has his hand up, probably has something on it.
Sean?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. I may have misunderstood what Nate said previously. I know the larger manufacturers in the modular manufactured housing industry do not use deposits typically to build out homes. They generally will take, like in our case, with all the independents I deal with, will issue a PO once it's built, and depending on the manufacturer, either offline or reaches site, then their PO is paid. I do have a concern if we're talking about, at least we need to discuss the using deposits to purchase materials, because we have had things like that happen in the past, especially as lead times get out there further. My concern is that a manufacturer would potentially say they're buying materials and then actually not provide the unit that's being built. And I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, because this did happen. So I think we have to be careful about how that's done. And I get cash flow and all those kinds of things, but I think to some extent we need to look at those funds not being able to be used until the unit's built offline, or, you know, ready for delivery or something like that. That's my only thoughts on it.
Sean, thanks for that. That's good information to have. Yes, this has happened before. Yes, we realize it's going to be new. And so, yeah, I really do want to get all the input from the manufacturers.
Yeah, we need to,
how to make this work for the industry in Colorado while still providing consumer protection.
And one thing to note is that the consumer protection aspect of this is an important component, because this covers consumer deposits, not business to business deposits.
Correct.
And yeah, I literally think we probably need to get a call together with a lot of the manufacturers to talk this through, because Sean, from your standpoint, when Clayton's owned by a powerhouse financial institution, they might not use deposits, but I would say, in my opinion, probably 60 to 75% of manufacturing facilities rely upon those deposits to buy the materials. That's why they require a deposit. And so it'll be, yeah, we just got to talk it through.
Thanks, Nate. Tracy, you got your hand up?
Yeah, obviously this is definitely going to be, I agree, we're going to need to have a conversation about this. And I do think that you guys need to understand that audience. Yeah, and I mean this with a lot of respect, Sean, but you know, if what you just said was the case, then I would say 90, if not all of the builders in the state of Colorado will be out of business. Because here's what the facts are. The facts are, we simply, people should be using money for those customers' builds. They should not be using it to rob Peter to pay Paul, and they should not be using it, you know, unfortunately, for bad business decisions. If I, as a builder, tell you I'm going to build you a house for $40,000, but it really costs 60,000, then yeah, I as a bad builder just did bad business and cost my company $20,000. Those people that are doing bad business shouldn't penalize all of the builders that are doing good business. I am writing contracts on a daily basis. And if I don't get a deposit to order doors and windows for a custom tiny house that I won't see for 4 months, I don't have cash flow to carry 10 or 12 or 16 builds at a time. I'm not Clayton Homes. I don't have that bank reach, if you will. Now, as a consumer, I want to protect those consumers too, because I did get those calls from customers that said, hey, I gave my life savings to somebody and they didn't build my tiny house. I have problems with those builders that are unethical. So I do think we need to, protect consumers, and I'm all about it. I'm all about proving my banking and my accounting practices are on the uppity up, but people need to understand that as a small business, that deposit I'm using to buy that customer's materials, sir, not for any other purposes. Now, are there a few bad apples in the bunch that don't know how to run a business or robbed Peter to pay Paul or made bad business decisions? Yes. So I think that's how we figure out how to not penalize the small businesses, but also protect the consumer at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to go to John Meyer and then over to the attendee list.
Yeah, I think, again, Nate pointed out, but it's important to keep in mind, it's two separate hats that you will wear if you're selling direct to the consumer, right? So the manufacturer, as current law, right, under the modular, I can't accept direct deposit because I'm not a registered seller in Colorado. So I rely on the dealer network. For example, I rely on Colorado Modular to be properly bonded and insured when accepting those deposits. And it's easy for Sean and I, yes, to be clean and not accept customer money until the home is delivered. So again, keep those two hats separate when you're thinking about this. And it's easy to get bonded as a manufacturer, in my opinion. Where the rule will be tough is how the state guidelines that and audits that, because it shouldn't be a year's worth of business that you get bonded for, because that would be a tremendously expensive bond. But it could be a monthly rotation, right? The state knows how many units Sean builds in a month. They know how many units I build in a month. They'll know how many units a tiny home builder builds in a month. And those delivery aspects should probably coincide with what that bonding requirement on a manufacturer would be, right? In addition, if you're a seller and manufacturer, the customer is still protected because of your seller bond requirement being a registered seller. So it's twofold.
John, I would to clarify an item is that the dealers are exempted from bonding for amounts that are sent to the manufacturers. That's the part you're missing.
Oh, yeah, because we don't do that.
So,
right.
and so what is now written in is that we have to figure out a way to protect those deposits because they're not protected on the dealer's bond anymore when they're sent to you, the manufacturer.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's an internal audit then, and it's very simple. In my mind, obviously, every job we do is book related, right? Money in, money out, material out, and covered. And so if the state needs a tie-in, it's really easy to show on a per job basis. If we took 20 grand and we see 22,000 go out on inventory purchase for a specific job, right? For example.
Right.
So that's the solution. I don't know how to write it.
And Sam and I had a call with the state auditor the other day about trying to figure out if we could write an agreed upon procedure to audit the manufacturer's bonds.
Right.
And so that this is part of there's a lot, because so everyone knows this, we weren't allowed to govern this until the tiny home bill came through. This was stuck in to the tiny home bill as something that was missed the last time we go around as far as consumer protection, authority. And so while we've been operating on the dealer side for a while with a version of this, the figuring it out on the manufacturing side is brand new, and there's a lot to be discussed.
Okay, thanks, Nate. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Margarita, I will come back to you in just a second. I noticed an attendee hand up before yours, I think. Robin, do you still have a comment?
Yes, please. Thank you,
Okay.
Sam. One thing I wanted to point out that an escrow account, when you put open up an escrow account separate from the operations account, that you cannot touch that account. And if you give the manufacturer ability to go in and pull money to buy material or something like that, then you know, I don't think that's a good system for, you know, some of these manufacturers that get backed up and they need to dip into that. But what might work would be if you had an escrow account that for some way it was held by an attorney or something where he could not touch it because he may be getting $30,000, $40,000 deposits on houses that he's not going to start for another 3 or 4 months. If there was a way to have a bond for whatever amount you pull out of your escrow account so that the consumer is covered, that way the manufacturer gets what they need and the consumer gets what they need.
You know, and thank you, Robin, and I'll come, Margarita, give me just a second. The construction industry has to have a solution that has worked in the past for them, right? It's the construction loan where you have the approved draws, right? And so there may be some experiences with that we can pull over. But Margarito, you had some comments?
No, yes. So based on the previous comment, I do agree that some flexibility will help us as manufacturers. And then the way I see it is as a general contractor doing small renovations or ADUs, which is one of the niches we specialize as well. And we usually ask for deposits. Obviously, those deposits, again, as Tracy pointed out, they are basically to buy some materials, but they do have a limit. We do not go above 20% of the overall costs, you know, and so when we are as small manufacturers, we do not have the flexibility that we do not have the money in our pockets that a large manufacturer can have. So again, if flexibility can be provided on that legislation, that will be great for us small manufacturers. I don't really know what flexibility could be, to be honest, but definitely just set up the rules as if we were capable of producing 1,000 units a year. Makes no sense from my point of view.
Thank you, Margarita. Tracy, I think you were up next, and then Sean, back to you maybe.
I was just going to say, Sam, I think you kind of touched on something there as far as, maybe we look at something kind of how the construction loan industry sets it up with draws. A lot of us are already doing draws on materials and labor. So I don't think we're that far off. We just need to figure out how to protect the consumers, right? And make sure that builders aren't doing things they're not supposed to.
Thank you, Tracy. Sean?
Yeah, just for clarity, give a little bit of my history is I've been doing this for about 38 years, and only the last 10 years have I been with Clayton Homes, where funding is a different deal. But prior to that, I was independent. I dealt with a lot of independent factories. I do agree with John that you've got to look at these two different hats. Business to business relationship is one thing, and then if it gets a little dicier when the manufacturer might be receiving direct deposits from the consumer, and obviously that's got to be addressed. We've dealt with this escrow portion. Trying to go to a title company is difficult because in the state of Colorado, most of them have to tie that back to real estate somehow before they can set up an escrow account. So that's where the bonding came from. Generally, the bonding is there, at least in the MH and modular industry, to cover, it has to be sufficient to cover customer deposits. It's not for the complete build of the home or anything else. So that way the consumer has the protection of those deposits. And I understand cash flow and deposits need to be used for certain portions of the bill. It just needs to be hammered out and put into writing so that it's easier to follow. Because I don't know what the auditing requirements are of the state right now, because that's done through our corporate office. But my guess is that's really not all been ferreted out as far as figuring that out. I'm sure the MH industry and the tiny home industry is going to kind of be working on the same things.
Yeah, the audit piece of it, I am unsure of too. I don't think that is currently, I haven't seen any audit reports of anything since I've been here. Of course, I'm fairly new. I think that going forward, the bonding is certainly an issue. I will tell you though, that we've got to make sure that the contracts are meeting legislative intent also, because there's I deal with complaints on a personal consumer side, and the contracts that I've reviewed from some of the sellers don't have any of the references back to the
Consumer Protection Act and all the things.
The escrow or bonding actual piece of it. And that's something that we're going to have to address. And so I may be sending out information to the sellers for 2023 going forward, that here's the new contract requirements that must be in every contract. And as we hammer out these escrow and surety bond issues. All right, let's see. Tracy, do you still have your hand up? Nate?
I do. Nope, I do. So I will just say this on that. Actually, Sean, thank you. I appreciate that. And I feel like you do have a ton of experience in this area. So I just want to remind everybody that when it comes to the tiny house builders across the state, and there's a couple dozen builders out there, just because only a couple of them are participating. I see a new one on today that I haven't, seen in a little while. So I'm excited to see that more people are starting to get involved, but there's 2-3 dozen of them out there, right? And there's only a handful of them that have been active. So I will just say this. I will volunteer my contract, Sam, to you, right? And because I'm curious to see what you're talking about as far as, like, I think that's an easy change, right? And I want to welcome it and say, hey, as a builder, I don't have a problem inserting the consumer protections references into my contract. Just help point me in the right direction of what those ones are going to be. And if it's going to, pertain to this bonding, then I think we have to, get that figured out first.
Yep. Thank you. Austin, I just saw that you popped into the meeting. I've allowed you to talk. Just raise your hand when you're ready to add anything. Robin, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just, thank you, Sam. I just wanted to kind of mention that in the past, when there are tiny house loans have been non-existent, there have been personal loans through things like Lightstream and Century 21, but the unit is not the collateral for that purchase. Right. So the consumer, is really having to come up with the cash somehow or another. But there is one bank out there, Liberty Bank out of Utah, that will use the tiny house as collateral. And he is making, I think, 15 and 21 year long loans. But he's also started a construction loan project. So if you're a builder of tiny houses, you have to be 2 years in business and meet some fiscal requirements. That's the only place that I know that that you can get loans on the consumer end, and then on the small manufacturer end, and then also protection of the builder, of the manufacturer. You take a 20% down, you build a house, and then the people can't qualify. They do things. So there's that other aspect too, that you know, you're relying on this house to be sold and get the money for it at the end of the build. And then for some reason, the consumer doesn't come through. Is there any thought about how to protect the builder in that respect?
Ooh, I got that.
Okay, go ahead.
So there is language today in the deposit area that says that if a manufacturer buys more materials than the deposit that was provided, that manufacturer has the right to bill that consumer for the additional materials if the house isn't built or something like that. So we have the starting of that. I'm not saying it's worded perfectly right, but that is a consideration. If somebody puts a deposit down, factory orders $100,000 worth of materials, and then they pull the order on them before it goes to the line, yes, we have some language already.
Okay, thanks, Nate. In the chat, I put the statute contract requirements, 2432, 3325. We're getting a lot of discussion on this. I'll bring that up also when we start at the next February 28th meeting. Mike, I think I've ignored you for a while.
No, not at all. I just raised my hand. I was going to follow up on a comment that Robin just made. I was actually thinking about making this suggestion. I mean, obviously, a lot of the discussion has been focused on the manufacturer itself covering the financial obligations, whether it's through the bond or the depositing model. What if, you know, because a lot of times custom home builders, you know, that do 20 houses a year usually require big deposits between 5 and 10% due at a contract signing, you know, and then they obviously build the house and then sell it to the end user. But what if the actual tiny house owner got their own construction loan, basically now sets up the responsibility for the build, and now they have the ability to provide the surety bond or the escrow type money for this process. And then obviously the bank representative, the lender, construction lender, would work with the builder for distribution of funds. So as you kind of shifting the responsibility back to the homeowner, just like they do in the custom building area. You know, a lot of times we think of people that are buying tiny houses don't really have the ability to afford them, but some do. and we might want to be able to offer, you know, and what Robin was saying about Liberty, and I have spoken to Liberty in the past, you know, they're on kind of the leading edge of some innovations in this financing area. So we might want to consider the possibility of the actual homeowner getting the construction loan, getting it built, and then converting that back into a collateralized loan over the period of time that they offer the loan. So just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you, Mike. And that ties to a comment that I want to make. It's tough for the state to recommend how you run your business, how you manage your cash flow, what banks you should go talk to, what bonding companies you should go to. I wonder if that's I don't want to assign Tawny a project, but is that something that the nonprofit side of the world could pull together?
You're gone the rest of the week.
So this is Tawny. I gathered a bunch of information when we were working on the requirements for the sellers. And so this factory piece is just an extension of what the group agreed should be required for sellers.
Okay, good.
I don't know if you want me to reach out to everyone and ask for the information again, or I could search through my sent emails to find that information.
I'd like to see it. And, you know, I think anybody on the group can reach out to you that has questions, but if you want to reach out to everybody too, feel free.
Okay.
Sam, one of the things that we're looking at in the, this is Mike Schmidt, we're looking at in the ASTM International Standards is obviously this aspect of being able to focus on the buyer and the homeowner requirements on a number of facets in this area. Financing is one of the ones that are kind of coming up in some of our discussions. So if you like, maybe I can make some recommendations and submit them in.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you all.
Got it.
All right. Not that we've solved it, but I think we've had a very thorough and robust discussion on this point. We'll bring it forward to the 14th. Everybody okay with moving on, or does somebody have some last words on this? Thank you. So still looking in Rule 4, we added some details on certification for a 3-year registration. We're still looking at certifications on an annual basis. I think that if we prove itself out over time, we might look at a multi-year certification process. But right now it's going to be, but we'll try to streamline that renewal as far as certifications. Again, talking about plan reviews, the transfer of locations within the same development. We currently, if requested, will allow a unit that is designed and planned for lot 363 to go to lot 364, and you can not have to make any changes, especially if it's if it's in the same development. So I'm trying to decide if we need a definition for development. We tweaked some rules on expired plans. Then in G, add a rule for tiny home requirements for tiny home plans. And then we're still trying to figure out what color the tiny home insignia should be, and added that as an option into 4.21.2. And then in I, letter I here on this slide under 4.21.5, we talk about the on-site built compliance versus AC, and then just clarifying that we're not affixing any insignia until that inspection is complete. We also added a requirement for inspection of a vehicle chassis for tiny homes. That will be, we can debate that. And then that is pretty much, then there's some changes to 4.27.8. That's the extent of the changes so far in Rule 4. Margarita?
I didn't get the requirement for the inspection of vehicle chassis. Is that going to be part or made by the vehicle chassis manufacturer, correct?
I'm trying to recall the verbiage around that. If it is already, so what I want is, I think from talking to some of the plan review guys, what they want to see, and the inspection team, what they want to see is the data plate with the gross vehicle weight and the actual plan itself that is submitted, that the vehicle chassis is part of that plan. And then a inspection of that, if it's something more than built for use, built for single use chassis that is designed and built for tiny homes. If it's a modified trailer, then we're going to need to see some inspections on that. Does that kind of answer your question, Margarita?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Tracy, and then I've got to jump to attendees.
No, Sam, I was just gonna say, I think you're built for purpose verbiage for the trailer, and then I think the requirement of asking for the trailer specifications. And then also, those specifications, when you buy a formal trailer, you get the documentation that shows your GVWR and all that. But I think also we added, and it may not be in this part, Sam, but the weight slip. Right, that's one of those things that I think we're adding to the rules, is making sure that everybody gets a weight slip on the built unit.
And maybe that's what this one is. No. This one is so yeah, as part of your basic framing instruction, absolutely. For installation, there was I think an ad for a late slip, and I'll have to take a look and see where we put that.
Okay.
Thank you for that reminder. All right, let me jump to the attendee side. Robin?
Yeah, on the, it was 4.x.xx on, I was 4.xx. It talked about when you build a tiny house, when you submit your plans for the tiny house, you have to submit the plans for the foundation. And the question that I had was, when builders build a tiny house, they may not know whether it's going to be a permanent or temporary foundation. Was wondering if there was a way to adjust that.
Yeah,
And
I would take a look at that, and I'm sorry it's not on this slide, but so I guess the question will be, and I had the same scenario run through my head, Robin, and that is a person buys a tiny house, it's inspected, it's done, it's ready to go. Is there a different attachment for temporary versus permanent foundation? I know that'll be up to the local jurisdiction to manage it, but for the state, where the state manages foundations, where there's not a local building department, my thought process was that the state would want to know where it's going to go and what it's going to go on as far as a foundation. But I would be happy to take a look at changes to that.
yeah, in my mind, if a temporary and a permanent foundation have to do the same thing, and it really wouldn't matter engineering wise, in other words, there's certain distance underneath of the main rail that you have to have support structures and certain tie downs and everything. And whether it was a poured concrete below the frost line, or whether it was a diamond pier foundation or whatever, the engineering needs to be the same to support the unit against wind loads and that kind of thing. So I think you could do
Robin, let
both.
me interrupt you for just a second. So then that would drive that the state is not going to be responsible for installation of that unit if we don't know where it's going. We know what it's designed to, right? And we can approve the insignia installation based on the design and the final inspection. But the installation then is I guess a concern from us. I don't want to have open installations on tiny homes dragging out for years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Understand totally. Yeah.
I'm okay to
I
give
just,
up that if the owner, and maybe the owner has to certify I'm not installing now. I just don't know how to handle that.
Yeah, and then you have the person that puts it on a temporary foundation and then decides to move it to a new location, and that would be on the local building department.
Yep.
For a situation like that. And then also I had submitted, we have the definition of remote inspections in the definitions, and I had submitted 4.27.1 to add what you can do, inspect remotely, and I didn't see that in this list.
Yeah, I wanted to take a look at that and have some discussion with my team on that. Robin, I'm not discounting it yet. It may be just a future recommended change.
Okay.
But keep me honest on that. Don't let me forget about it.
All right, and
Austin? So go ahead, Robin.
that's all right. I had one more thing, but it went out of my brain, and if it comes back to me, I'll raise my hand again.
Okay, thank you. Austin, you've got your hand up.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I just trying to clarify for my own understanding with the conversation that just happened with Robin and you.
Yes.
So if I guess temporary foundation in my brain, is that like skids? Because if a house is built on a trailer, like you can't take it off because it's like permanently attached to it. So I guess I get confused by that. I've heard people say, hey, we're going to build a house on skids. They load it on a trailer to go have it delivered. And then they unload that onto a foundation. That I can understand. But I guess I just get a little confused when we say temporary and then we use the word trailer, because if they're being built like how they're supposed to, you're permanently attaching it to the trailer, which is the foundation. So I just didn't know if there's any way I could understand that better, what you guys were just discussing.
Sure, Robin, let me try to, I'm sorry, sure, Austin, let me try to explain that. The definition of a tiny home is that it is built on a vehicle chassis with wheel, and we've defined vehicle chassis as the bed and the wheels and hitch and all that. So, but it's designed for permanent occupancy, which means that it has to be tied to the ground somehow. So at some point, if you're going to put it on a temporary foundation, it has to be attached to meet that temporary foundation requirement. The
Anchor down.
tiny houses on skids, those are modular tiny houses. You pick them up with a crane or you slide them off the truck.
Right.
Whatever that is. That's
Okay.
not a tiny home.
Okay, so I'm understanding it correctly then.
Yes, sir.
It's just at the end of the day, the trailer itself is getting anchored down to some form of concrete, or whether they're, stakes driven into the ground so deep, anchored in with, concrete or whatever. I mean,
Really
I
fancy,
think-
pretty stakes. Yeah.
yeah.
Below frost line, please. But yeah.
Okay.
We're saying the same thing, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Somebody on my panelist side has a hand up. Tracy.
Well, of course, mine was about the same thing, right? It's the trailer is the foundation.
No,
Right.
the trailer has to be attached to the ground somehow, right?
All right, and I'm good with the anchoring down and the fasten points as well and all that, but I think that we still have confusion as far as the way we communicate this. And so maybe it's a nomenclature, and maybe we just need to start practicing the proper terminology, and maybe we'll get it down here, Sam.
Yeah, I think so. To me, the vehicle chassis is part of the unit and provides the structural support for the tiny home on top of it. It is also the anchor point for the permanent or temporary foundation, whether it's, and however that looks. Does that make sense?
It's going to take a while to wrap the brain around it, right? Because this industry has been mentally programmed to to recognize the trailer, the chassis as the foundation, because you still have people that go and travel everywhere and they're not strapping down, whether you want to call it temporary or permanent, right? Because they're out traveling. So
Sure.
in the case, that's why we always have, said the trailer is the foundation, if you will. But I understand.
Yeah. But then I get the calls from the consumers that say, I bought a tiny home and I put a skirt on it and my local jurisdiction won't give me a CO.
Yeah.
And I put it on jack stands and I tied it into the spigot out in the yard. So I've got water. And why isn't it permanent? Why isn't it, why won't why can't I get a CO on this unit? So, and I'm trying to follow the way the legislation is very clear that tiny homes are built on a vehicle chassis and they are designed for permanent occupancy, which means they're going to be eligible for a CO if they're on a temporary or permanent foundation. But that foundation piece where it's attaching to that vehicle chassis, whether the axles are on it or not, and I assume they're on it, is what we've got to work through.
That actually was beautifully said, Sam. So I think that verbiage and that communication is what we're going to have to make sure we're, consistent within the industry.
Cool. Okay. We are rocking and rolling. Rule 5. I've highlighted rules 5.2 through 5.9 on the sellers of manufactured homes. I think we're reviewing those and we may have changes in a future version. I think that dealt with, let me look at my reference doc here real quick. That's dealing with escrow and bonding and all that. I need to add some clarification that the state has the right to call some of those, and I'm not sure that's in there. And again, it's gonna be this, we've got changes coming on that. Sorry, it's not real clear to me yet how we're gonna do that. Sellers, if you have any ideas on how to strengthen that section and make it crystal clear on what we're trying to do, I'd appreciate wording changes on that. Rule 6, installations of manufactured homes. I haven't received any changes yet on that piece of it. We just talked about installation of tiny homes. Does the state and I say certify the unit as complete without installation? Because currently that's different than what we do with manufactured or any other factory built structures in the state. It's not complete till it arrives on site, is set, tied in, all the what was called alternative construction is done, and gets a final inspection. But if tiny homes are going to stay on wheels and go be parked someplace, are we done at the build stage and not the installation stage? Tracy?
Absolutely, because as a builder from a liability perspective, my insurance, all of my insurance, everything that's set up to cover that unit while it's in my building, unless a builder has proper licensing and certifications and CDLs and proper insurance, they really should not be moving their own homes. It's actually, they're not supposed to if it's for pay. So most of us actually hire people, right, that actually do these installations. So from a builder perspective, that unit is inspected on my site. Once it's hitched up by a driver, that driver's insurance kicks in and he's now responsible and liable until it gets to the homeowner. And when it gets to the homeowner site and it unhitches, now the homeowner's insurance is now kicks in, right? And they're liable. But from a builder perspective, I would like to see it be done at at the exchange of the keys when that unit leaves my building, because I don't know where it's going. It can go travel to Texas or New York and then do a couple of trips out of nowhere. And then maybe they'll put it on some land somewhere or an RV park. I really don't know.
Right. And so I think that's my indication, or my inclination also is to do it that way. And I see some other hands up. I'll pop in just a second. In that, then it's going to be up to the local jurisdiction to take that unit. If in 6 months or a year down the road, they want to go and get a CO, that unit has been inspected and is done, or it goes to another state, it's got the Colorado sticker on it, right? And then I don't have to track it after that, unless it's going to a jurisdiction that doesn't have a local building department, and then it's going to come back to the state for the foundation piece of that, right? And the CO. All right, let me run through the list. John Meyer?
Yeah, I think that legal reference is just called care, custody, and control. So if you're going to write something, that's
Okay.
what it references.
Thank you. Janine?
From a jurisdictional point of view, I think since this is under the MHIP program, that it should be the same process and standard. It comes to the site, all site elements are built. It is, we do the move and set inspection, make sure everything's tied down correctly. And the state comes in and does the electrical for us and plumbing for us. I think should be treated just like another modular. It is a manufactured product. It's coming through the manufactured inspection program. I think that to keep it clean, that the rules should stay the same.
Thank you. That's a really good point. I forgot about that MHIP, which I have in a previous meeting said we're going to have to update after we get the final rules done. So that's my next big project. But yeah, you're right. That's probably where it should go.
Thank you.
Sean Roos?
Yeah, I hadn't really put a lot of thought to this previously, but I think one of the unique challenges with the tiny home industry is the fact that in the MH and modular industry, you know, we order homes, we will put them on a display lot, and then they get delivered. We have transactional things for all of that because the consumer basically, under every circumstance that I am with a factory, cannot go directly to the factory and purchase a home. So in the tiny home industry, I think there needs to be some clarity because we're talking about in the MH industry, a builder builds a home and a retailer sells the home. And in the tiny home industry, that same difference may still be in effect, but also it may not be in effect to where the builder is the retailer. And, you know, I think that could get very confusing based upon, you know, some of these transfer of wording from the MH industry back into this legislation or this clarification and rules. Does that make any sense?
Yes. It makes sense to me. It's a different cat, right? Okay, let me go to my attendees. Oh, Janine, wait, you had one more comment on that, maybe?
Yes, sir. And my position is more consumer protection than anything. If we follow this through like we do with the MHIP program, then we have that consumer protection all the way to the end versus just when it leaves the builder's lot. That's my concern, is the consumer protection all the way to the end of this.
Yep, thank you for that. I'm going to jump over to the attendee side. Just because it reorganized everybody into alphabetical. Austin, you're first.
And that's why I named my son Austin.
Good job.
Yeah. Hey, so I just want to slap in some clarification here so I can understand a little better here. There's usually two ways a tiny home is going to get delivered. And usually it's one way more often than the other. One way is you have RV hookups, the wastegates. You click on a hose, it goes into where it's supposed to dump. You have a cord that plugs in as power, and you have a water spigot that you attach a potable drinking hose to the house, to the tiny home. That's a mobile person. That's somebody that's going to be traveling, going around and checking things out, coming back home, parking, whatever. The other way the homes get finished out, and this isn't as often, but it does happen, is you provide stub outs. So from like the modular homes, they literally are gluing in piping when the house is delivered. So there's additional steps that have to happen in order to truly test the units. You actually have to hook up a power, from the ground inside the breaker panel in order to finish testing. And so there's a few things there that are a little different. So I guess what I'm getting at is if as a builder, if I'm providing a unit somebody can drive down the road across the country, how would that inspection be going for them when they buy their unit, they purchase it? Are they having to take it home and have it hook up to have it meet these requirements you're talking about? Or are we able to categorize and maybe make two options here to where this customer that's making it more permanent, where they are providing stub outs where things have to get glued in, that would be able to fulfill what you guys are asking for in regards to those inspections, those last little details that you guys were talking about for a unit to be called completed.
So
if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So my understanding is that when a tiny home leaves the factory, it's a complete unit. There's no, what we in the past have called AC items. You don't have trusses, you don't have connections between unit boxes for a double wide. There's not a double wide tiny home, right? When you're done in a tiny home, right? It's ready to go, to be set. And this is where I draw the line, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong. The line is if you want a CO, I mean, if you go to an RV park, you're fine, right? You've got everything you need to do. You're not asking for long-term occupancy, even though your home is designed and approved for that. You're staying there for 3 months, 4 months, whatever it may be, and then you're going someplace else. You can rock and roll. We don't care. But if you go up to Janine, to Park County and say, hey, I bought 35 acres of heaven. I'm going to drill a well. I'm going to do a leach field. And I'm going to put my tiny home up there so I can watch the elk. And I want to stay there. She's going to want to know that it's built to code, and she's going to give you a CO to do that.
Right. So there's two ways they will end up hooking up. One, with the wastegate, with the way the cords, you plug a cord into it for power and you hook up a water hose from a spigot. I agree with all of that being done the right way. And that thank God you guys are getting involved forcing it, because that's a no-brainer. That needs to be done that way. It's longevity. Where I'm getting at is, let's say that person going to Park County, they're up there, they own 35 beautiful acres of heaven, and they brought this unit up there for the most part. Hey, this is where I want it to be. But they also want to go visit their whatever in Kansas. So they would unhook it and drive it down there, because that's part of the perks of the tiny home. One way you're gluing it in, and then the other way, everything's done correctly, but you're hooking a wastegate up from there, a hose to your septic. And assuming everything's done correct, one way it's glued in permanently, where you have to cut into stuff to be able to detach it. And then another way it's mobile. So I'm just trying not to get too confused in regards to somebody that is bought this unit to where it's mobile. They're going up to Park County. They had to get the permits and everything done for the electrical, the sewer, the power, the water. All that has to be done to the 9. You have to provide the foundation for it to be sat on, so that way it can be anchored down. Maybe somebody's coming out and inspecting, making sure everything's hooked up correctly. But that same customer 6 months down the road wants to drive this unit somewhere different. So
it's tough, Austin, and I've struggled with that exact scenario. I call it the snowbird scenario, right? They bring up their unit in the summer, Vail Valley, wherever, during the summer, and then they pack up and go to Arizona or New Mexico, Phoenix or Tucson in the winter. There's going to be some consumer requirement on this that I think, when you talk to the local jurisdictions, because there's no set rule on how long they will let people stay in an RV.
Right.
And there are requirements for them to tie in permanently, and I don't know how we do that. I don't think I know enough that we've solved that issue, but we've got to have that flexibility. I mean, that was one of the requirements in HB 22-1242, was the flexibility, knowing that it's going to be moving. Robin, I see your hand up.
Yeah, first addressing Austin's thing, I believe I remember in there somewhere that both types of hookups were allowed. The type of hookup that you would put into an RV park. So my vision would be a pedestal, with the RV type hookups, and then direct connect was the other way to go if it was permanently affixed. And there's still the possibility that if it's permanently affixed, that you could retrofit it back to with the temporaries. So I just wanted to mention that to everybody and to Austin, that I think I saw that in there, that either or. So based on what the end user wants to do, would be the way you would do your hookups. And then we require when you were talking about the electrical and testing and things, we do require at the plant that wherever it was built, that they hook up power to it, so we can do a final inspection and check the GFCIs and all of the things. It's just if it's not a plug and it's a direct connect, they just need to hook up temporarily power to it so we can do those testings. And then one more comment, and then I'll listen. We were talking about, the foundations, and that may be the solution. If you talked, Sam, maybe you're done once it's finished in the factory. And I'm thinking about spec houses, houses that are built as show houses, houses where the manufacturer built for a customer and the customer backed out of it. And maybe it did have an end location at one time and it doesn't now, and he's going to have to resell it. So I think there may be, you guys are finished with them once they're done at the factory, but you're not finished with them if they're going to be located somewhere in where there is no building department for the foundation and hookups. That's just my 2 cents worth. Not all builds have a end location. Sometimes they're spec houses, and sometimes the people back out of the deals, and so there needs to be some flexibility for the manufacturer to be able to locate it after he has the thing completed. And it may be months before he resells it, so you don't want to stay in it for months until he finds a new location. There might be a way to end it once it's completed in the factory, and then reopen it somehow or another when it gets replaced.
And yes, Robin, those are good comments. We have that flexibility and we deal on that in the department on a case-by-case basis. A lot model that's sitting on a lot, or even if it was one buyer the buyer actually fails to complete the transaction and they've resold it. As long as it's designed to the wind, the snow load, thermal requirements, we'll let that go someplace else. As long as the requirements exceed or meet that local jurisdiction requirements. And so it'll be interesting to do with tiny homes too, the same way, because those are going to be on the insignias. If I remember right, it says exactly what wind, snow, and local jurisdiction that it's going to.
At least on the data plate.
Yeah.
It should have that.
I said insignia, but I think I meant data plate. Okay, Nate, you dropped off the video. You popped into the attendee list. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I've been clicking the allow you to talk and to also.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yep.
good. All right. So I don't know. I keep clicking on promoting you back to panelist.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
We're fine. Yep.
So I think you're in travel mode right now. So
I am.
Just didn't want you to think that I was ignoring you.
Oh, I just got a request to join.
Okay, there you go. I think you finally popped that over. Okay, good. Any other discussion on this? All right, let's go to the next slide. So we have time, it's 10:40, to continue some of these discussions. But for the next meeting, again, any comments on what we've discussed this meeting, or if things have clicked for you and you've got to want to go back and look at some of those other meetings, slides to kind of make sure that we're getting things right. I'll take any comments. Seriously, I want this rule set to be very good. I kind of feel like I'm driving through these things, but I'm expecting you guys, I guess I need to clarify my expectations that you guys are looking at the draft administrative rules and you're going to send me comments. And then we'll bring it around again. So if you have anything on what we've discussed or these other three items, if I can get these comments by the 6th of February, I'll get them rolled into, I believe, the Thursday that's after the 6th, to get out another new slide deck and draft rule change. And we're going to be what I really need is the installation of multifamily structures. And we're going to take a look at that. We'll look at training, education, and experience requirements. That may be across the board for installers and inspectors and third-party agencies. And then the big caveat there is any other rule cleanup, including what we've done here today, as well as what's in the
Sam,
in the past. Yes.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand on my phone, but question on the multifamily, installation stuff,
Yes.
inspector stuff, things like that. Is there something that language that you guys are going to propose? Because it's kind of new language, like, we don't really have it. That's a new item. Is there something that, for example, like we'd like to write comments, right? But should we be writing comments on something that you're expecting to propose? Like, has possibly Donnie come up with, a version that is going to end up being kind of the starting point, or, where's our starting point there?
I don't know that I have one, Nate. I think that's a really good suggestion. Donnie and I should maybe talk, at least come up with a bullet list on our concerns.
Items that need
at
to
the
be
top of the
addressed
list for me is fees, but fees is not the most important part of that, right? So let's figure out what the concerns are. I think it's the continuing the use of third-party inspection agencies on those, especially if it's we're seeing a lot more interest in multi-story installations and big unit multi-boxes, and we can't dedicate an inspector to be there every day for every box that comes in. Do we do it by level? Does that work for the industry? Is it by segment? You build one segment of an apartment complex and have it all buttoned up, and then we run out there and take a look. I don't know. We've had some pretty vague discussions. So I guess I would also ask from the manufacturers that are actually looking at multifamily, if you please take a look at our administrative rules and see where the gaps are. Because what I don't want to have to do is end up interpreting rules when we've not had that serious discussion yet.
Okay.
So Nate, I think I successfully danced around your question.
Successfully, yes.
Thank you.
Well, we'll look for some possible bullet points. If not, we need to start coming up with our own suggestions.
That's exactly what I said.
Right.
Tim.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. So this next set of things, multifamily structures and some of the other things, so that's getting beyond the scope of just the tiny home legislation, correct? And to take advantage of this current TAC. And if that's the case, then the tiny home manufacturers are not really a part of that. I mean, not that they can't be a part of that discussion, but would it be better to have some more, like in the previous years, we've had our TAC going through the regular regs, multifamily, et cetera, rules, that more of the manufacturers are invited or are able to take part in that? Or is there any thought on that?
Tim, that's a really good opportunity for me to clarify. We are not talking about multifamily tiny homes. I'm just not sure how that would work.
I was wondering.
All the rules are totally open now for administrative changes to the rules that we've got going forward. So tiny homes, so multifamily, that will that's open to any of the manufacturers that are in that field. It's open to any rule that we currently have for any modular, factory built or commercial is open for all the building department officials and representatives to also comment on. We've got almost 2 months, and I'll throw the schedule slide up here in just a second, to get all those other changes. So yes, please, everybody take a look at the entire rule set from 1 to 7. I think there's 7 sets of rules to really look at cleanup. Margarita?
No, overall, I think that this chapter is important for to develop small communities, not, multi stacking buildings. It could be impossible to stack in the tiny home on wheels units, but I see this as an important chapter just to set up setbacks, between tiny homes, so it will prevent designing and manufacturing homes that are too expensive because we are, adding fire blocking all over the walls or things like that. So if it is just, guidelines on how to build a small community, just with tiny homes on wheels, and what are the minimum, again, setbacks and, services that these tiny homes should have, communities should have, I think that could be a decent goal for this chapter.
Yeah, I think this is a really good time, Margarita, and I'm glad you brought that up. I've been talking to some of the nonprofit groups that are building tiny home villages for homeless or transitional housing, or for veterans, or for youth in transition to adulthood. And so if the tiny home itself is going to be, let's talk about a tiny home village right now, right? There's a couple ways to do that. You can do it with the manufactured housing or mobile home model, right? Where you have units set up that are either owned by the owner of the tiny home or owned by the park and leased out, and the land doesn't go with that, right? Those are still going to need to be built if they're a dwelling, then they need to be built to IRC 2018 as amended. All the codes is amended for there. This other thing that we're talking about, though, is maybe it's sleeping units only with a community shower or a community room or a community kitchen. We're seeing those come in, and I know I talked to a nonprofit the other day that said they just want the sleeping quarters done. Those are going to need to be built to the IBC, because it's not being sold to a consumer for long-term occupancy. It's going to fall under that commercial field, and there may be opportunities for tiny home manufacturers to build both, right? Not a complete unit as far as occupancy, and complete units when we talk about occupancy. So I'm thinking that that village, or that I think that goes back to the definition that I threw out there on one of the first slides, transitional housing community, because areas like Denver and some of the other communities around are giving 1 or 2 year leases on land for that structure, or for those structures. So they need to be able to be moved in 1 or 2 years, right? And it's just sleeping quarters. It makes it really nice if it's on a trailer and it can be hitched up, and rather than disassembled and then reassembled someplace else. So that really, if this group has any concerns on that name or what that concept looks like, now's the time to clarify it in the rules. But my goal was to put that definition in there, and let's have that discussion on what it looks like. But the shower structure will have to be built to IBC. The kitchen structure would be built to IBC. The community meeting rooms, counseling rooms, if necessary, will be built to the Commercial International Building Code. Does that make sense? Margarita, did I answer your question?
Yeah, actually, it was not a question. Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah, it wasn't a question. You're right. I'm sorry.
It is an opportunity for us as manufacturers. We also set up or discuss once a couple of meetings ago, if not more, the minimum size for that tiny house on wheels unit. What should that be? Remember, and so by setting those dimensions, I think it's important that we are moving into thinking that these units can live within communities that do not, or those units do not have to have kitchens, things like that. So I see it as an opportunity as manufacturer, definitely. And so I do agree. I'm happy to see, more how this specific chapter is going to develop. So yeah, maybe we should basically provide you some comments by email to just start developing this chapter a little bit more in deep.
Okay, thank you, Margarita. Tracy, I'm going to go to you next, and then Tim.
I was just gonna say, Sam, I just wanted us just to be careful and as far as like the inclusivity or the exclusivity, because you're right, we do have a lot of different nonprofit programs out there, but there's even developers that were wanting to develop tiny house communities that weren't just geared towards veterans or foster kids or homeless. And I think that, we have been able to get some of those communities, villages, whatever we want to call them, approved over the years, through blood, sweat, and tears. And we've made great strides in that. But now I think this is the opportunity to start seeing more developments while following the rules that you're saying, Sam. I just don't want it to be too, I don't want to just define homeless or foster kids or veterans, because really there's a lot of people out there that are saying, well, what about us, right? I've got elderly women, we've got young millennials. And so there will be some villages and some communities developed where it's not a 2-year lease, or it's not just, veterans or just whatever. So I think we have to leave that a little bit open-ended.
Oh, and I'm certainly, thank you, Tracy, for helping me clean up my terminology. I am not trying to say that it's only this or only that. What I'm trying to do
no worries.
To build in that flexibility. It could be everything from a traditional mobile home park where you have a whole mix of resident types, right? The land is owned by a single individual. He's either doing 1-year lot leases to people that, the snowbird community that we talked about, or people that are full-time annual residents, all in tiny homes, or a mix of tiny homes and manufactured homes, or a mixture of HUD and tiny homes. Let's keep that flexibility in there. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that the unit is certified for full-time occupancy.
Yep.
Built for full-time occupancy. But the stuff that is transitional is going to have to be built to that IBC code, and there are ways to do that either on a vehicle chassis or not, right? And so we're going to see modular stuff coming in on skids that is picked up with a crane and set in place. I talked to a guy on the West Slope where he was taking 500 acres and planning to build houses, tiny houses on site, and wanted to know what that inspection process would look like. So that's also interesting, because he then said it, yeah, and then they might want to take him to Arizona in the winter. It's like, wow, how do we accommodate that, right? So let's keep those villages. I don't think anything we've done to date rules out any village of any composite of residential types. Does that make sense?
It completely makes sense. And I think that some of the zoning changes that are happening across the state are also going to impact some of that, because the committee or the team that I just participated on with Shelley, right, and some other local city officials here in Colorado Springs, was about the flex zoning that we're developing. And within that flex zoning, we were actually defining what a community or village or whatever tiny house development, right, look likes. And
If-
so
if-
I
if you like
saw
my defi-
zoning.
If you like my definition, you can use it.
I want zoning and us to marry as far as in
Zoning-
our definitions and our communication.
Yeah, and we will, again, it is not the responsibility or the role of the
Sure.
state to tell what the zoning for local communities will be. And so what all we can do, I think, in my mind, and this is just Sam talking, is we can provide a safe inspected unit that can be designed for long-term occupancy and everything, for any type of zoning that's out there. There's the flex zoning is a unique challenge. There's a whole segment of the modular industry that is building to this transitional housing community. And we're going to move them toward the IBC side of the house. Tim, you've had your hand up patiently for a while.
Yeah, thank you. If I don't recall, and I know it was somewhere in the paperwork, the definition that your initial definition for that transitional housing, that'd be helpful, at least for me to see that so I can make the comments. Yep. But with that being said, it needs to be, to me, clear to the tiny home manufacturers that when you cross the threshold, and I guess that's when your team is going to determine what crosses the threshold into the IBC world, which means, as you were saying, IPC, fuel gas code, and definitely in particular, the energy code. There are no tiny home exceptions, so to speak, embedded in any of those codes. So if it gets into the IBC world, the manufacturer, you're going to have to be conforming for everything, means of egress, fire sprinkler, potentially, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just to be clear, from the manufacturer standpoint, it could very well sound like a good opportunity, but possibly a lot of the manufacturers wouldn't be capable with what they build now to meet those different standards, which are much more stringent.
Good point, Tim. Yes, absolutely. We need to make sure everything is built compliant. Everything. I'm curious to see what the changes in IEC are going to drive for these modular school trailers, right? School units, modular classrooms. The state still has responsibility for those if they're built in state or out of state. We look at the drawings. Heck, we look at drawings for concrete bathroom facilities that are going into national parks, or rest areas that are coming in on a trailer, built complete, picked up with the crane and set down. We look at every oil and gas field contained unit that is built out of state and comes in to make sure that's compliant with all the applicable codes. So we do a lot more than residential, and I think that's not a bad thing. But yes, how all these code changes coming up, and we've got some big ones coming up, how we interpret those and apply those. And my intent is always to give the manufacturers as much heads up as possible that we are looking at those things, because it's tough to turn a factory around midstream with arbitrary changes. Full notification, I think, is extremely important. And so going back to that temporary housing community, Tim, if you want to look at that Word document that I sent out, the red line changes of the rules, it's in Rule 1. I added a transitional house community. I don't know that I attached a number to it, but I tried to put all those definitions in alphabetical order. So it's someplace between S and U. Attendees, there's another hand up. Tawny?
Thanks, Sam. So I'm going to look at that definition as well, just because it sounds like there might be some spillover into zoning. Which I don't think that these rules are connected to, just because zoning is left up to the local jurisdictions. So, so this is a good conversation to have, but, outside of just, providing interpretations and suggestions, I don't know that there's much jurisdiction specific to, zoning or setbacks, etc.
Okay, thank you.
That's my personal opinion.
Sorry, I somehow stopped screen sharing. I'm going to throw that back on. This is actually the next slide, the remaining schedule. February 14th is our next meeting, and then we're done with this page, right? Everything's perfect moving forward. After that, we will have the February 28th meeting. The next 2 or 3 meetings on this slide is just fine tuning those draft rules. So we've got lots, I don't want to say lots of time, because I think we're having some really good discussions and we're going to see proposed changes. But by March 28th, my goal is to say, this is it, we're done. Because by the March 31st, we have to file those rules with the Attorney General's office for review. And May 9th, they go to rulemaking hearing. So any changes after the 28th are going to be really hard to make. And may not be able to be made. So we've got February and most of March to get this stuff cleaned up. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. There's a, wait, sorry, there was an attendee hand up. I got you though, right, Tony?
Yes, my apologies. I just put my hand down.
Not a problem. Thank you. Okay, that's kind of where we are. Any other questions, discussions? Again, thank you so much for participation. Really good discussions. Please send me comments for the next meeting by February 6th. And I'll get those turned around as quickly as possible, and hopefully have everybody's package out to them Thursday by 5 o'clock. Are these packages useful? Is there anything else you would like to see? Let me know. If you have any comments on structuring these meetings, I'd be happy to take that too. I want this to be as useful to the group as possible. Anybody else have anything? Otherwise, I'm going to end the recording. And we'll be done. Thank you all. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Have a great one.
You bet.